Hello and welcome to the next part in the Creating an Album series. It's been a while since the last one. We're going to be looking at the break-in this episode, and I'm going to change up the format slightly. Instead of going through all the different instruments one by one, opening them up to just see basically another contact instrument, which doesn't help you in any way, I'm just going to list them off right at the beginning so you know what I use, and then I'll talk about the structure and how I do it. So hopefully we'll have a more in-depth video, but a slightly quicker video. Let's get into it. So I have Metropolis Arc 1, Metropolis Arc 3, I have Trillion, I also have Serum, Gravity, and the EXS24 in this track today. The majority of the instruments have been used in other tracks, but I feel this track is the most different compared to the others, with the bass line making the core melody and the rest sort of following with that. So we've got strings, bass 1 and bass 1 plus 12, I'll get into that. We've got a kick, rim ensemble, toms, and the PL putter, which is a Serum pluck. And that starts off the introduction section. So I'll play that and then I'll talk about it. So, as you can hear, fairly simplistic in terms of the progression through that section. The only thing that comes in the sort of second part, this bit here, is the toms. But the main thing I would say about this part is the PL putter. And I'll solo it and then you'll hear what it actually is doing. You can see the plugins on the left. Really simple thing. I'll open up the MIDI. Let's get rid of that. So as you can see, very simple rhythm. But what we've done, we've automated the EQ there. So you can see 380 to 2750. That's the high cut frequency filter, as you can sort of see there. That's got replica, which will probably be doing the diffusion, I believe. Yeah, diffusion, so basically the reverb of this track. And then we've got the stereo delay, and to be honest, that's probably just on the default setting because it works very well for my needs. But without that in this section, it sounds quite empty. So I really feel like that pluck helps to add that interest in this section, and especially with the automation, helps to sort of slowly bring it in, and then you notice it a lot more because it wasn't there and then it comes in. So the main part alongside that will be the bass. We've got sustain strings, they're doing the chords alongside it. That's fine. They're not even modulated. Kick is doing a simple 4 on the floor kind of rhythm, and the rim ensemble is doing so interesting, but nothing too exciting compared to previous tracks is what I'm sort of trying to say here. But the bass and the bass plus 12 are the main things because they are the main rhythm behind the whole track. As you will hear from me soloing this first bass, that they're slightly different. As you could hear, that is fully on the left, and as you can see there, minus 64, fully on the left. Now, bass 1 plus 12 is 12 semitones up, but it's on the right. So the reason I did that is having the higher octave bass has a lot more clarity, a lot more detail. You lose out on a little bit of the bass end, but you have that intricate high end on those notes, whereas bass 1 it's the lower mellow sound, but you don't have the clarity. So if I spread it left for the low, it doesn't really matter which way you do it, but together I think they sound great, and it feels so open and wide compared to just having a bass down the center. And as much as you're meant to have a bass down the center, or as much as I have been taught to do that, why not experiment? Why not be different? So this is what it sounds like. I think it sounds great. So anyway, that's the start of this track, so the introduction. We use a timpani roll, as always, to get into the next section. So slightly change it up with this. The bass rhythm changes, the notes change. The sustained strings don't participate in this section. It's the melody of the strings that we're going for. You may have also heard it's tremolo rather than just sustained strings. This helps to add a little interest. You can see also the black bars going up and down. It's quite modulated. I would have done that manually without clicking it in. Maybe some of them I needed to refine, so that's why it's a very straight line here. But as you can see, a lot more nodes to suggest that I've done it manually. Bring in the brass stabs, doing some simple chords that follow along with the bass. A cool sounding chord. Then we also have the whirly keys, which are essentially the electric piano of the Serum presets that I have put tremolo on and replica. So that also follows along with the chords. And then we've also got the pluck carrying on through. We remove the percussion in the next section and then slowly bring it back to give that progression sense, along with the fact that it fits better. I don't need the kick, the rim ensemble and the toms to be going through when I bring them back in later on, and it has a bigger impact. So that's why I do that. So the rim ensemble is the same rhythm, and so are the toms. So they're just copied and pasted back into this section. But we introduce a EXS24 808 tuned kick, which sounds like this. It will sound a little bit weird. The reason I bring that into the track, and even if you can't really hear it, it adds this electronic sense to the bass. It's not completely natural, it goes a little robotic, and therefore I also introduce the 808 hi-hats. So you can hear that little fill, or trill, I suppose. I've got plugins on this one, so I've got tremolo, stereo delay and replica. Stereo delay is most likely the default, and tremolo, there are the settings. Not full on left and right, but just a little bit to add interest. I played most of this in the rhythm, but this little bit here, I couldn't play it that quick, so I just copy and paste over some of the notes and then get rid of them. So it has a cool little rhythm that runs through, and then I use it more and more. And it has that electronic element to go alongside the pluck as well, especially as the whirly keys have come in. It's starting to sound a bit more electronic. So then we transition into the next section with not a timpani roll, funnily enough. We use gravity. Now this is keeping that electronic element, and it sounds just really cool. So not only do we have that transitioning in, we keep a gravity drone going, so it's not the transition, but it's the closest I could find in gravity that is very similar to the transition, but a sustained note, just to have a bit of bass undertone in that section. But I'll play it now and you'll hear what I've done compared to the previous section. So I bring in a drum kit, so I get rid of the majority of the brass stabs, but just keep in some dissonant stabs at the end of each sort of 4 bars. Helps to add interest, a bit of ear candy, as it were. We get the kick back in from the starting section. Toms and the rim stay the same, but the orchestral kick comes in, and if you hear it now. So you've got a ride going on there and a snare, and the kick being in its own track helps to actually make it sound a bit bigger. Separately, they don't sound fantastic, but with the whole track it keeps the rhythm going. I've also used a bus, like I've done in previous tracks, where I put the direction mixer on it to fully spread to 2, to make the kit sound bigger. Normally I'd use the Space Designer as well to have that room sound, the room sound when recording the drums, but it actually sounded a little bit too reverberant in this track, so I removed it, but kept the spread just because it's slightly nicer than being centered. So as you can see, we've kept the keys, the tuned kick, and the hi-hats. I've obviously changed the notes back to the bass line because the bass line changes from this section here, and then we have some melody lines, and this is both serum and the strings, and funnily enough the strings are the same as what are up here. They're tremolo sustained, but unfortunately, as you can see, I've used sustained strings back again. For the chords, I couldn't use that track to also do my melody line, so I had to make a new track, and that's why I've got strings down here as well. But this I've used before, this serum patch. With a little pitch bend on the end of that melody line, just to have a little bit of interest, and then we've got the same with the strings. So together, it's got quite a Egyptian kind of sound, which I always love. It's that dissonant sort of eerie kind of sound. So anyway, that's that section. Then we use a timpani roll rather than the gravity transition into the next section, which is very simple. It's just, as you can see, it's the bass line and some plucks. Before I go into that last section, I'll quickly go over this. So as you can hear, it's the 2 bass lines doing their own rhythm. That is the main focus point for that little section. We've got the plucks going until, as you can see just here, they go out when it turns into a sustained note on the bass. We use the transition, the gravity transition, to sound sort of like something's happened. It's going down, and then it's that sustained bass. And we've got reverse cymbal as well, which brings us into the next section. And not only that, we bring the tempo from 100 to 130. So it sounds pumped up compared to the other sections. And here we have the new bass line, the faster bass line, with the hi-hats going on here. So in fact that might even be a copy of these ones, but it's sped up because of the tempo. The reversed cymbal is actually, I believe, the orchestral kit. Just do one crash and then bounce that down, reverse it, line it up quite nicely. I've also put stereo delay on it, so it's not a harsh cut off. It has a little bit of a tail. Helps to mold nicely into that next section. And the last thing in this little section is the sort of tom roll that I quite liked. I was thinking this, I'd love to have dum 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 dum, and I was like, how am I going to do that? I feel like there's no way I can play it or anything like that, and I think I just clicked it in. As you can see, all the velocities are the same, so I think I did just click it in. So we've got a crash going into that next section, then we've got the tom roll. So I really like that tom roll that goes into that next section. You hear the whirly keys start playing again, the plucks come back in, we keep the drum kit going, and we bring in a new lead, which is another Serum lead. So you can hear the sort of different melodies that I'm using. I'm switching between having the bass be the focal point to the melody being the focal point in some Serum patches. We also have sort of sometimes sustained strings just to have a nice sounding vibe, but it's mainly about the electronic stuff that really helped to progress this track, and that's why I'm using more Serum plugins, Serum patches to make the melodies rather than the like strings or having a brass section, because they don't really work for this track, especially with the bass line being that natural bass line. It's not like it's a low string or a cello, so that's why I use them predominantly, and the orchestral elements are the secondary components of this track compared to the other tracks that I've created in this album. So anyway, let's hear this next part. So, like I've said, you've got the drum kits carrying on. We've got some brass dissonant stabs going on, just like we had here in this little bit. And I did mention that the Tristram lead was a melody. It's not really. It's actually just an underlying sound. But it actually sounds quite cool. I can't remember exactly why I decided to do this. It's a very cool sound, very easy to make, just one note, then pitch bend down at the end, and then a couple taps. So anyway, we gravity transition into the next part. So I know I played quite a lot there. It's mainly because it's very similar. I introduced these strings back from this section here, the sustained strings I mean. So that goes along with this next section. We obviously had the gravity transition, so we introduced the drone again. We introduced the melody with the ethereal pad here from Serum, but we don't have the strings as well because it is a more electronic part of the track. So then we transition with the timpani roll, not the transition, into this slightly lower part because we change up the rhythm. So we bring back that tom roll from this start session because we get rid of the overall orchestral kit. Once again, the bass line becomes the focal point, with the rim ensemble just helping to keep that rhythm going. We don't want to completely get rid of it because that's what happens at the end. And we also have the hi-hats carrying on that rhythm as well. So we have a reverse cymbal that goes alongside the orchestral kit, tom fill, to go back into the last section. But we're obviously missing sustained strings and the dissonant sound. It's actually just the tuned kick that comes back in to finish everything off. And in fact, that part, it's maybe more the bass and the plucks being the melody focal point, or the just focal point in general. And then to finish it off, we get rid of the clarity-driven bass, and we are just left with the lower mellow-toned bass in the left-hand side, just to finish it off. So as this is a very different track to other ones, I feel like it doesn't need to necessarily resolve itself. So that is the track The Break-In for the Creating an Album series. Leave a like, comment and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next video.